Leave Us Alone is the title of the book, Getting the Government's Hands Off Our Money, Our Guns, and Our Lives. Grover Norquist, the president of Americans for Tax Reform, among many other things, on the line with us. Grover, welcome back to the program.
Delighted to be with you.
I'm astounded that you've added guns into this. I guess this is sort of a... But let me ask you a question. You famously, back in 2002, talking to Mara Liasson on NPR, said that you didn't want to destroy government, you just wanted to shrink it down small enough to drown in a bathtub. Are we there yet?
No, unfortunately, the government's getting larger and larger, so the bathtub, to fit in the bathtub, it'd be a pretty large bathtub.
Okay, so George W. Bush took us from a $5 trillion deficit to a $12 trillion deficit. I didn't hear much yelling and screaming about that during those 8 years. Now I'm hearing lots of yelling and screaming. And I remember back in the 70s when Jude Wanniski came up with his two Santa Claus theory and suggested to the Republican Party that what they should do overtly was run up huge deficits when they were in power, and then whenever a Democrat came into power, yell and scream about those deficits. Is that not now what is exactly being done?
No, well, somebody may be doing that, but Americans for Tax Reform, the group that I run, we do two things. We ask people to commit to oppose any and all tax increases. That's the Taxpayer Protection Pledge that we offer to all candidates for federal office as well as state office. And the good news is that we have a lot of people taking it and keeping it. The person who famously took it and didn't keep it was George Bush, number one, and
right.
He lost re-election as a result of having done that, having broken the pledge. Yeah. Well, he had a reasonably successful presidency other than that. He kicked Iraq out of Kuwait and didn't get stuck occupying the place.
Well, his son pointed out if he had just made the war last 3 months longer, he would have won the re-election. I think he was right.
Well, that's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
But his son tried that, and it didn't work.
Actually, it did. It got him re-elected.
The son?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Re-elected as opposed to... Okay.
Yeah, that was his whole point back in 2000 or in 99 or 2000, with Mickey Herskowitz, is the guy who wrote his autobiography. He pointed out that his dad blew it by ending the war too soon, that wartime presidents have more. But we're off topic.
That's a frightening thought.
And
back to
Americans.
Step one, don't raise taxes. Step two, rein in spending. And this is the
right.
failure of the Bush administration. The 8 years, well, 8 years of Bush,
right.
4.5 of which he had a Republican House and Senate during that period. But they spent too much money.
No, I get it, and let me tell you how this looks to me, and you can tell me if I'm crazy or not, and if so, how. It seems to me that you, and I'm assuming that you're a decent guy with decent motives, but that you are basically a shill for very wealthy people, because there are two different markets for labor. For people who work for a living and spend virtually all of their paycheck, the labor market is entirely post-tax. In other words, it's a take-home pay market. And so if you look at a country like in Denmark, for example, where people pay an average of 56% income tax, the take-home pay is almost identical to the United States. The wages themselves are much higher. Their minimum wage is $18 an hour. So taxes really for working people don't matter at all. On the other hand, for the rich people that I think you're just a shill for, either wittingly or unwittingly, for rich people who have a lot of money left over beyond their living expenses, when taxes go up, their income actually goes down. And when taxes go down, their income actually goes up. And so I'd say that you're defending the interests of very wealthy people and doing absolutely nothing except confusing working people.
Nice try, but in point of fact, the most important reason to keep taxes down is that higher taxes slow economic growth. It's why Europe has grown more slowly than the United States over the last 30, 40 years. Their growth rates have been lower than us, and their standards of living have fallen behind ours as a result. When you reduce taxes and you create economic growth, either under John F. Kennedy or Ronald Reagan, you create jobs. And the millions of jobs that were created during the Reagan administration after the tax cut took effect, taking marginal tax rates down 22%.
There are always jobs being created. There are always jobs being created. Number one. Number two, I've spent a fair amount of time in Europe. I lived in Europe, and the standard of living in Europe, they're doing very well, thank you very much. And in fact, in Germany, they were basically unfazed by this recent recession. That now here in the United States, we've got almost 20% real unemployment or underemployment. Because we have no social safety net, and they've got a very healthy social safety net as a result of the taxes that they pay.
Well, again, nice try, but the per capita income in Europe is lower than the United States and any of the countries that you can look at.
And so are many of the expenses.
Well, they pay an average of a 20% value-added tax, and this is one of the challenges that we have when you talk about
Grover,
only
have
rich
you ever
people
been to
paying
Europe?
taxes. Yes, I have, actually.
Then I don't understand how you can say this. I mean, have you seen large pockets of poverty in Europe?
Well, you have one, slower economic growth. The Europeans do have a couple of have several.
What they don't have is a small number of mind-bogglingly wealthy people and a large number of relatively poor people. We have in the United States the most unequal distribution of wealth in the entire world, or in the entire developed world, of the 30 OECD nations.
Well, when you have more economic growth, as we have had in the United States, we have a challenge now in that the government is spending so much money and running up such a debt. You suggested that Jude Wininski had some theory about
the 2-cent plus theory. The Wall Street Journal actually reported on it. That's how I learned about it.
Right. What the Democrats under Obama
and David Stockman later in his book said that's what we were doing.
Well, Stockman misunderstood what we were doing. I love him dearly, but he never understood what supply-side economics was about. The very simple idea of supply-side economics is if you tax something, you're going to get less of it, and you don't want to tax savings, investment, and work. You want to keep those tax rates lower rather than higher. Every time we've cut
in the last 30 years since Reagan did supply-side economics, and it's pretty much wiped out the American middle class, we've seen that work very well, haven't we? Right now in the United States, child poverty is 20%. 1 out of every 5 children in the United States lives in poverty. That's double the average in the OECD countries. The U.S. ranks in the bottom half of countries in terms of financial benefits to families with children. Every single one of the other 30 OECD countries has some form required, legally mandated form of paid leave. The United States does not. The U.S. is the only country that has none. The lowest is Korea with 8 days of leave. Social mobility is the lowest in the United States. Educational achievement among children, public spending for child care and early education, the U.S. is in the bottom third.
You're counting government expenditures, and this idea that...
No, I'm talking about the social consequences of government expenditures. Government can do some things well.
Well, I think the challenge here is that, unfortunately, under this government, with Obama, Reid, and Pelosi in charge, we've seen a tremendous increase through the stimulus spending, the second tranche of the bank bailout, and they added $1 trillion in spending the last time they had the budget over the next
You're talking about decade. The bank bailout that they just made the $30 billion profit on?
The idea that the federal government should take money from taxpayers and hand it to banks is a bad idea, whether or not they've lost all that money.
Broadly speaking, I am with you on that, okay. and was at the beginning, but the fact of the matter is that they did it very smart, and they're making a profit on it. And it didn't cause us to slide into another Republican Great Depression.
Wait. Where's our $700 billion back? We spent 350 and then $350 billion again, and you think we got $30 billion of it back, and that's a profit? No, you just lost $670 billion. Where's this cash coming back, and when is it coming back? Throwing money at banks is a bad idea. The federal government ought not to be stealing people's money and spending it on banks or things like that, or auto companies, General Motors. When the government starts spending money
let them
like
all
that,
die.
I'm sorry?
Let them all die. Let them all crash and burn.
I'm not sure that by failing to bail them out that they would all crash.
Yeah. Well, oddly enough, with regard to the banks, I don't disagree with you, and it's a fine talking point for right and left. Grover Norquist, ATR.org, Americans for Tax Reform. Grover, thanks for dropping by.
Good.